who I am. That's it's always interesting when someone asks that question because it's always about like what angle should I actually approach this from.
Yeah, we're friends, right?
Yeah, we're friends. So, but anyways, okay. Um, I would say I am somewhat of an AI enthusiast. I think to start with, I'm a builder at heart. Um, I am an educator. I love to just share. Educator is like a strong word. As actually,
Yeah, yeah.
when you say educator, it's like you're all serious educating. But I love to share knowledge or learn in the open, as people say. Just geek out about stuff. Um, daytime, try to work.
AI engineer.
Yeah, AI engineer, forward deployed engineer type role. But yeah, so that's what I do. I mean, and then I'm a father as well, father of two kids, husband to an amazing wife as well. Brother and
Shout
son
out
and
to the
things like
wives
that.
out there.
For sure, for sure, for sure. But yeah, I just and I love just learning. I think that's the biggest thing. I would say I'm a life learner. That's basically how I describe myself.
I 100% agree with you because whenever I talk to, we get together like once a month.
Yeah.
But whenever we meet, I learn something new, whether that's about like MCP or today we just sat down and you asked me about ChatGPT Atlas.
Yeah.
And I'm like so unimpressed by it because I use it wrong and you're like, this is how you use it. So I always have a good time talking to you because I learn so much from you and you bring us perspective that, it's pretty rare for the city that we live in, for the people who are building, like
Yeah.
one of those few people to actually do real shit.
Yeah, it's I think there's this burst of excitement when you learn something new. There's what they call dopamine or whatever rush when you
Oh, yeah.
have when you learn something new, and you can, especially when you can fuse that with how it solves a particular problem. So why am I excited about something like ChatGPT Atlas as an example? I can immediately see how productivity goes up, not just for me of course, but for a lot of people. So yeah, it's fun. It's something I've always enjoyed doing anyways, and like right now I think I found a home in this space because I've done so many things in my life. Actually, I was trading at some point, forex
Yeah,
and things like
TLDR,
that.
like
And
walk me through it. I know you used to be at Slack, now you're
yeah,
at
yeah,
Writer. You start your own company
yeah,
and you do like you do teaching on YouTube as well. So kind of walk
yeah.
me through the timeline of like a couple of years back.
Timeline, yeah.
Yeah.
So when I graduated from school, I wanted to, because I studied economics actually. So
Oh, same. I was an econ major. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting, amazing. But I just didn't vibe with the sort of go work for a bank because those were the options at the time. Just go work for a bank. I came across an institute. I'm from Nigeria originally, and an institute called NIIT, and they were teaching Oracle Database 10G. That's how far back it is.
I actually have no idea what that is. You gotta tell me.
Oracle Database 10G, it was this version of Oracle's database which powers basically everything, because a lot of the banks and the schools, hospitals, everyone were using like raw databases to store their stuff. Like very little SaaS at the time, so people were just storing in databases, right?
Yeah.
So learning Oracle 10G at the time was sort of how you got into the tech space. So it opened my mind to a lot of things. Oh, you could store information like this and you could retrieve it. I remember writing my very first SQL statement, and I was like, wow, this is amazing.
You can retrieve anything.
Yeah, you can retrieve anything.
Yeah.
You could, and then you could then start to see how you build things with a database. So that was my very first exposure. So I went ahead and rather than doing a master's in international business,
Oh, that was your path.
that was the path I was
Econ
going
and
for.
then
Yeah, yeah, I was going
international
to do a
business.
master's in international business. I decided to move more into information systems. So I spent 1 year in India doing this.
Oh wow.
Yes,
That's cool.
Which, yeah, one of the most amazing times I in my life.
How old
actually.
were you?
Pretty early. I mean, it was early 20s, 21, maybe 20, something like that.
Dang.
yeah.
Didn't know anybody in India. Just kind of.
No, my mom and I had visited India the year before.
Yeah.
I loved India. I love India. Especially, I lived in Bangalore. And Bangalore is sort of the Silicon Valley of
Yeah.
India. If you've never been to Bangalore, is like a melting pot.
Is that
It's-
where the ITT school is?
Yeah, there's so many ICT schools
Yeah.
across India, including the one in Bangalore. I think there are a few of them
Uh-huh.
across. So, yeah, the IIT is there, and there's so many. Everywhere was a tech school basically, and everyone you met was a software engineer.
Yeah.
It was just so cool, and you saw all these huge companies and stuff like that. So, it had such a big impact in my life, and I had this professor. Her name is Priya, Vishnu Priya, and she had studied in the US. She studied maths in the US, and she came back to India to teach. And she challenged us so much. She wanted us to understand enterprise systems like so well, like CRM systems, ERP systems, supply management. So what she did, like the previous sort of professor was more like go learn these very specific C++, C sharp and all of that stuff.
Right.
And she was like, no, I'm going to bring people from the industry to teach you guys.
Best kind of teacher.
Yes, she brought folks from Oracle, she brought folks from Intel and all these places to teach us. And those guys, impacted some of the biggest knowledge that I have till today. And that was my first sort of foray into information technology.
Cool. And how long were you working in that space for?
I was in India for a year, and I came back to Nigeria, tried to do my own thing. At the time, the biggest thing I learned at the time was web content management systems. And I'll say a few names, and let's see if it rings a bell.
Okay.
Drupal,
Sure, yeah.
Joomla.
Yeah, sure, yes. All like CMS.
Yeah.
Like,
Way
LMS.
before WordPress became
Yeah.
the sort of dominant. So
Yeah.
so
Maybe
I
they
was
still exist, right?
yeah, they do. They're there. They're out there. Like
Yeah.
some companies are still running on Joomla and Drupal for sure. So yeah, so Joomla, Drupal. I started building websites for companies at the time. So that was sort of the very first thing I had to do. Then I found myself at Oracle as an intern in 2013, which was amazing. And I was talking to a few people and didn't know what to really specialize in at the time. There were a lot of options. There was an ERP option, there was sort of human resources, systems. So I spoke to someone and he told me something that resonates and it still stays with me today. He said, well, a lot of the back end systems work for organizations has been solved. Like how systems manage their accounting and all these types of things have been solved. The one thing that is still open to solve is what happens in the front office, which is how you
Business
engage
logic.
with customers. Like how do you engage with customers? Like all the systems about how you engage with customers. So that was why, because at the time as an intern, you can choose your track. So I chose to go in the customer relationship management side of things. And that opened up like a lot of opportunities because obviously social relationship management, marketing automation, sales automation. So those were my very first sort of days with tech, working at Oracle. At Oracle, I was first working in the Nigerian division. At some point, I got moved on to work for the regional division. So working with, Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, and solving different
Were you
problems.
traveling a lot?
Oh, I was traveling quite a lot. Yeah, I visited Austria, Turkey, a few places. It was amazing. My time at Oracle was amazing. Not necessarily because of the travel, by the way, but because I had this amazing manager who wanted me to learn things. And that was the learning. The learning actually started there. He wanted me to learn different technologies. So my very first foray into AI was actually NLP. So learning about how to process data that is coming in from customer inquiries and how to figure out like sort of how to make sense of them at the time.
Classification.
Yeah, classify. Just very simple classification at the time and stuff like that. How to cluster. Industry ontology was a big thing, like, writing data dictionaries to solve, industry specific problems. Knowledge management. So there was so many solutions and I had the opportunity to go do different courses on these solutions and it really formed like a very, very strong foundation for me personally.
Yeah. So was that like that's why like your interest in AI kind of like started?
Yes, because we're trying to solve a simple problem. So I'll paint the picture for you. Telecommunications went through this sort of massive shift, especially in Europe and Middle East, Africa, in that region. When GSM came, everyone had a smartphone. But what happened with that is that call centers had to be there to support everyone who had a smartphone. And there was this explosion of people who had smartphones. and with that came an explosion in customer support tickets.
Right.
So companies were struggling massively with how to deal with all of that. So you have people waiting online for hours to get support, and so companies were very, very interested in how do we deflect from phone calls to self-service, so people could go on a website, find a support ticket, and solve their problem. But then you say, okay, well, people are not always great at reading documentation. I'm sorry.
That's been true for the last two decades. So.
Exactly. So then that's where the chatbots came in. It's like, okay, but can we try to understand what this person is saying and try to see if we can serve them the article or serve them a snippet of the article. So those were the very first big problems from an AI perspective that I was trying to solve. It was massive. And for the largest organizations in the world, that was something they wanted to solve. I remember talking to someone who said, every time our agent picks up the phone, we lose money.
Oh, because it's so shitty?
Because it's expensive.
Oh, okay.
Having someone sitting down and taking your call, you have to
Oh,
pay
you mean
that
an
person.
agent? That's
Yes.
so funny because I thought when you say agent, you mean like an AI agent.
Yeah,
That's how brain rot everyone is like
Exactly,
in 2025. Or maybe it's just me.
exactly.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, man. Like I have to preface this by saying agents used to mean people.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Anyways, but yes, every time someone picked up the phone to answer a particular customer ticket, they were losing money. So they were trying as much as possible to prevent. And you notice it with banks, even till today. You notice that when you call a bank, they're trying as best as possible to get you on the website.
Dude, even today, like I had this thing with Air Canada, so I'm
Yep.
flying out tomorrow to go to my best friend's wedding
Yep.
tomorrow. But I had to wait on the phone for like 10 minutes, and then they asked me if I wanted to put my name down. They could call me back.
Yeah.
They called me back, and then I had to wait another 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Then what's the point of me like getting a call back?
Like, getting a call back, yeah.
Yeah.
Customer care has always been a very, very tough space. And I do have empathy for people because they're trying to solve those problems. But there are a lot of challenges with customer support. The people who work in customer support are not going to stay there with you. There's a huge churn.
Right.
So you constantly have these agents who are leaving, human agents, who are leaving
Thanks for
every
reminding
time.
me. Yeah.
Who are leaving and coming back and things of that nature. And so you're retraining people. So for companies, they don't want to do that. They don't want you calling their phone. They want you to go online and go solve your problem by yourself. So that was the biggest problem. Now, fast forward to 2020 when the pandemic hit, that problem got even way more exacerbated.
Is it driven by e-commerce? Like, what is it?
Yes, because exactly. More people are doing things online, which means that they want support online as well.
Banking,
Yeah.
everything that used to have a branch, people
Yeah.
can't go inside a branch
Exactly.
anymore.
So there was an explosion. I was at Hootsuite at the time, and we were dealing with social customer support. So people who were, there was some companies that were brave enough to say, I would use my Twitter channel or my Facebook channel as a support channel. And then we just, all of a sudden, one morning, their mailboxes exploded.
Because everyone flooded
Yeah.
Twitter and
Yeah.
like all that. Yeah.
And everyone is like, we need a chatbot.
Yeah.
We need a chatbot
And
to
what
solve
year
this
was
problem.
this? The pandemic, right?
Pandemic, yeah.
So pre like
Yeah.
Transformer and all that.
Yes, pre that. And so to solve such problems, and you hear about Dialogflow, ManyChat. I think there's a company called Ada that is out of Canada as well. And they were trying to solve this problem. The challenge with the problem was intent. How do you understand intent? And you have to configure intent. And people spend months, if not years, trying to configure intents that would cover every single use case. So implementing a chatbot to solve a particular problem took years or months, and most of them were not successful, because then there'll be an edge case that throws people off, and they're like, this chatbot is,
Yeah.
whatever, and then they're like, I almost swore.
The
by
user
way.
says like the wrong word, and
Yeah.
then the chatbot's like, "Well, we didn't see that." in
Yeah,
the
and it's,
classification
it was
to us."
so robotic, and people just lost interest in it, and then people didn't like chatbots anymore, and so that's sort of where the journey kind of started with AI and sort of NLP systems and things of that nature.
Makes sense. And fast forward to today, do you still think that customer chatbot and like support stuff is still like the marquee use case for these kinds of agents and LLMs anymore, or is it something else that we should be thinking about?
I think it has a place, And I think a lot of companies, likes of Sierra, Pylon, of late, and are going into that space. And I think the incumbents like Zendesk and Salesforce, obviously, are also investing there. I think it's one of the use cases. It doesn't interest me anymore, personally.
Yeah, it's a bit overdone.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's there's so many other use cases. Like, what I get excited about is taking a swat of unstructured data and trying to make sense of it, because there's a lot of that lying around. Like, really getting at the heart of an enterprise knowledge, or knowledge just generally speaking, that is hiding in these unstructured forms, is what gets me really excited right now.
Makes sense. So a couple months ago, a couple years ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, when we say like unstructured data, people would normally think of RAG and like retrieval based on embedding systems
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But more recently, some people were coming out and say like, and I personally also think the same thing, which is agentic search. Kind of like make it more agentic is kind of like the way to do a lot of things, and sometimes even let you skirt around vectorizing, embedding
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff. So from like the stuff that you've seen at work or the stuff that you built yourself, like do you see a trend of like where people are going towards, where they're analyzing unstructured data? Like what's like the approach today to analyzing unstructured data?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, as it's always, driven by the use case specifically and what you're looking for. I think there's always going to be need for search, because that's more discovery. I'm going to go look for something that is hidden in this pile of data.
Yeah.
And you still need, similarity search.
When
or
people say
rank
the RAG, they
systems,
should
or-
understand that it's a search problem,
Yes,
recommendation
yes,
problem.
exactly. You're trying to find something that is not quite there. But then there is extraction. It's there. I know exactly what I'm looking for.
It's just in somebody's handwriting.
Yes, it's in handwritings, it's in scanned documents, it's in a long memo that was written 10 years ago. So there's so many of those type of things, and I want to extract that because I want to use that to. So the approach there is slightly different, of course. I think a lot of the traditional sort of data science strategies or approach still apply in terms of how you want to go do those things. But what's changing things today is that you can accelerate the development. Before now, you had to wait weeks and months to get someone in and do this. And now you can really accelerate how quickly you can build. I think that's one aspect of AI actually that, besides the products that you build, or using it within a product, is the fact that using it as an accelerant, if that's a word.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. It's like now it goes both ways, right? Like as an end user, you can write any script you want
Yes.
to process data and do data engineering. But also like instead of pre-training or fine-tuning a model to do like extraction on like OCR, you can use an off-the-shelf like LLM with vision encoder to like get the first pass and then see how you can improve from there. So I definitely agree with you. I think and again, like the traditional data science, data engineering stuff still apply, because you still need to process data in like a structured way, and then
Correct. Those pipelines, those data pipelines that these data scientists would have had, they're still very, very relevant today. The only thing is that the speed is different. Like now you can do those things in seconds, right? You're not waiting around for a whole year to get a team together to go figure it out. It's in weeks. You could get pretty far and get things done quickly. So that's a big part of the whole thing.
Let's talk about the app SDK, because
Yes.
we had a conversation about this as soon as it came out.
Yeah.
I was sitting in the crowd at OpenAI Dev Day, and I don't know about Twitter, but people were skeptical on Twitter. But me and my friend Rick was sitting in the crowd, and we're like, this is very polished, at least from the demo.
Yeah.
So when it came out, you actually tried it the same day, and then you made a bunch of videos on YouTube about it.
Yeah.
And tell me your first impression, and tell me what you think about the ChatGPT app SDK that just came out.
Yeah, I think I have to preface what I'm about to say by saying that models are no longer, in my view anyways, the differentiating factor for AI solutions. I think when you and I we'll meet up and we'll talk what model is up today and which one is doing
They're
well,
kind of the same thing now.
and stuff like that, right? But what's happening is that user experience is so key. Like, you know, I don't know if you read the research, and I'm gonna approach this from an enterprise perspective if you don't mind, but most enterprises are failing at adopting generative AI, and the reason they're failing is because someone comes in and says we need to solve a problem, and they watch the demo, and the problem was being solved by chat, and they come in and they approach it with chat. But the reality is that you want to meet people where they are. And what got me super excited about Apps SDK is the fact that they're incorporating that, those components that make it much easier to consume information. So many things you want to represent, you can't represent in text. People get tired of text. So, having these UI components as a way to represent information is, I think, game changing from my perspective. So that's what gets me excited. And it means that it makes it easier to distribute solutions that people are actually going to want to use.
Yeah, so I'm hearing it's an interface that is accessible to people who are used to chat.
Yeah.
And a new distribution channel. How is this different from like the custom GPTs that we got from OpenAI from the last iteration? And before that, it was called plugins, I think.
Yeah. Plugins, custom GPTs. I think the challenge with custom GPTs was because, of course, people were still trying to figure out how to use AI and what to use it for. So I think the very first few custom GPTs that were out there were doing the same things you could do with ChatGPT. They were just basically someone who had written like a really good prompt, potentially. I did see a few good ones. Like there's this one that generates logos. I don't know if you ever used it.
And I use one that generates pictures of me in Legos.
Oh, okay.
That's my favorite.
So I like the ones that incorporated maybe some kind of tool call to do something interesting, but the vast majority of them were just basically prompts. So they could have called it a prompt library or a prompt marketplace. That probably would have been a more
rappers.
Yeah, so I think maybe people didn't quite latch onto it as a result. It wasn't that exciting, I think, because you could just do that in ChatGPT.
And you mentioned that that was a couple months ago. I think probably a year ago at this point, right? Mm-hmm. And people weren't super caught up with AI yet.
Yeah, they weren't. Yeah. They weren't like pretty, because it had tools. Mm-hmm. You could still call tools and do interesting things,
which is like API calls.
Yes, there were API calls, and it wasn't that easy. It wasn't. It's still an involved setup today. You still need to know what you're doing.
Probably more involved with like SDK and
MCPs and MCPs that have resources that nobody really knows exactly how they work and stuff like that. But I think maturity, and then I think also the fact that it was just mostly a text-based thing that was doing pretty much stuff that people could just do on their own. So I think that's why it didn't take off. I think we're still yet to see what's going to happen with Apps SDK, by the way. Mm-hmm. Because I think one of the things that, as OpenAI is releasing these things and they look cool, you then look at the fact that Anthropic just dropped skills.
Yeah.
So how does that sort of, I'm sort of watching this very closely to see how it all plays out. But I think definitely, and you were one of those people who, I was following your work, early on, some of the apps you were building and how much craft you put into it. I did appreciate that, because what truly makes an application sticky is the experience you have with it. That's why you want to come back to it every single time. So user experience for me is a very, very big thing. And I think that's why Apps SDK has a chance. Interestingly, it's not a new idea. Slack has something called, I don't know if you've ever seen it, Slack Block Kit.
You know what? Is it not like, so I used the Slack SDK once.
Yeah.
And I know blocks are just different types of messages and files and stuff, right?
And UI component. Like basically like when I looked at the widget kit or whatever they released, it just follows the same pattern of what the Slack Block Kit.
And you say this because you used to work at Slack.
Yeah. Well, I built quite a lot of Slack applications in my time.
So how is that similar to what you're seeing today with Chat SDK?
Yeah, it's just like an opinionated way of thinking about UI components to represent information. The Slack bucket was maybe a little bit less friendly because it was so much of their own. It was basically a JSON representation of the UI components. I think with OpenAI, they've made it easy for you to use React, which obviously has more legs, and people are going to be able to adopt it more widely. So I have high hopes for it. I think with the browser now, though, that just changes everything as well. Because if you're in the browser and you're chatting, they can show components at you like they're doing right now, and then it's just an ecosystem that they're building. So I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that they acquired a design company for $1 billion. How much was it?
Johnny Ive? Yeah, I remember Johnny Ive was on stage and the conversation. I think it was because the room was super hot that day, and when I came back home, I watched the talk again. I was like, oh, it's interesting, but I remember everyone around my vicinity was kind of like zoning out. And Sam and Johnny were talking. But okay, so going back to what you said about like the app SDK, kind of like what I see from like the app SDK and the skills is that these companies are trying to keep you in the platform for longer. Because then you can use one platform for pretty much anything. If you want to tap into ChatGPT's user, you have to build this integration in this app to talk in their format with ChatGPT. Same thing for skills, right? And there's this really interesting similarity between the two, which is that it's very code relevant. So skills is like you can spin up like a sandbox, write code, and then call the skills. That's very interesting. It's not just like, oh, call tools, call prompt. App SDK, again, it's not that simple to just build an app SDK app. Talking
you need to build an MCP server.
You gotta know how to spin up an MCP server and know how to like set up all these like auth and like streamable components and stuff like that. Who the hell knows what the resources are? Because nobody was using it before all this stuff, right? So you built a few. And what are some of the things that you noticed, and any advice for somebody who's trying to build like an app SDK with ChatGPT?
I think one of the challenges or at least one of the considerations when you're building an apps SDK app right now is, where does it fit? Like, what is the right problem to solve? Because you always have to start from there. I actually liked the documentation they put together, and they emphasize this a lot in terms of like starting from a problem you're trying to solve. My very first one was a problem that I do have. I mean, it's a cheesy problem. It's my fantasy league. I'd never have time to make a choice about what player I want to choose, and can it help me research that? So I think that's where the big challenge is, like where I think for restaurants and existing apps that we use today in our app, in the app ecosystem that we use, where you can bring those the UI features of that into it. I think that works very, very well. But I think the biggest place where I find there might be opportunity would be around research. I'm trying to do some kind of research, extensive research, and I want the results to be much more than text. I want to bring other UI components in while I'm doing that research. I want to be able to visualize the data in a certain type of way. So I think that might be a good place to start if you're building any apps SDK app, is to start with anything people are going out to research. I think with financial services as an example, or investment type data, like how can I visualize this for people? How can I do things of that nature? I think are the very first places to start. But I think we're going to see a lot of use cases. But technically speaking, to your question, about apps SDK, I think it's just about mastering MCP servers. If you understand how MCP servers work, if you can spin them up, and you and I have talked about this. And by the way, you sent me this article, which is very, very important in my philosophy about MCP servers, because I see people get it wrong. In fact, I think OpenAI themselves were kind of a little misleading in their prescription about MCP servers. And I was reading something from Anthropic as well that sort of, you shouldn't think about MCP servers as API wrappers, which is sort of the central theme. I think you shouldn't as well. I think you should be thinking truly about how you want to design your MCP servers, because it makes a whole lot of difference in terms of how the agent uses it, which is probably why I think skills is a very, very sound idea in terms of how they think about using tools, because it's much more, predictable, so to speak.
I find that to be very interesting, because that's just kind of like, everything just kind of clicked for me when you said that, because I think I sent you a couple of things, but there were some articles that kind of like that I remember right now. So one was from Block. So the team at Block built MCP for, so Block is a financial service.
Yeah.
And their MCP, instead of like doing it as an API wrapper,
Yeah.
which is a lot of companies are doing nowadays as a service, which is kind of wrong,
Yeah.
right? We both think it's kind of wrong. But instead they wrap workflows. So like it has to be end to end and very descriptive in natural language. It can't just be a granular like, this is just the only thing you can do is to fetch users.
Yeah.
It's the only thing you can update this database. Because what happens is, and especially for like large MCP, hosted MCP servers like GitHub MCP and Notion MCP, is that your agent has to hop like 20 times to get something done.
God. Oh my
and it
God.
floods the context window and it
Yeah.
costs you money and takes forever. And I think the most recent thing that we shared over like our text was that somebody, and actually this is something that my friend Leo sent me.
Yeah.
Was that Cloudflare decided to experiment with, okay, agent sees MCP server, discovers the tools,
Yeah.
and then builds a TypeScript interface to call that. So that when you call multiple tools or resources from the MCP server, you don't have to loop the LLM.
Yeah.
Instead, you just pipe it in your TypeScript
Oh wow, that's
script.
really smart.
Yeah,
That's really
to
smart.
then like just, okay, this is done, and then do this, and then do this. And it's supposedly much faster when you have to do like multi-hop kind of operations.
Yeah, I did run an experiment to your point about the multi-hop thing. I was thinking about using the Notion MCP server, and I wanted to just use it for my own personal use and stuff like that. And I store all my video content, I store in this sort of table, so that it just has, it's very, very simple, nothing fancy, not started, in progress, done, just simple.
Yeah.
But I just wanted it to go find me all the stuff that was done, just to help me count it, that kind of thing. And I put it out there on Claude, and it took 9 steps. And the approach it was taking, which concerned me a lot, was that it would go look at the table and look at each return to see if it matched what I was asking for, which is such an inefficient way to do
And how
things.
many rows did it?
Yeah, how
return,
many
right?
rows are you going to be looking
Hundreds.
at, right? If I had 1,000 rows, are you going to go look, that? So I think to your point, people think it's an API, but they're not empathizing with the agent. I think that's the way I see it. It's like you're not really putting yourself in the shoes of the agent,
Yeah.
because you're putting a lot of cognitive load on the agent to really understand how to call your APIs. And they may not just know how to.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Somebody said to me that API documentation is for developers, because
Yeah.
as a developer you can filter out what you need from the docs.
Yes.
But for an agent, you gotta stuff all that stuff in and then
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
And it stays in the context.
Yeah,
Which is
and depending
horrible.
on what it saw first, it might start doing something before. There's so many variables you're putting in play, which is why I think the idea of skills, going back to skills, is fascinates me, because it's like I'm giving the agent a playbook to go do things, so it's very prescriptive. And I think there's still, obviously there's a lot of use cases for autonomous agents that choose, what path to follow and what tools to use and stuff like that. I'm not saying that that's not relevant, but I think we're finding, especially in the enterprise, especially in B2B spaces, you want as much determinism in the way things happen, you know? Yeah, so,
I agree.
yeah.
So last thing I want to talk about is you're very what's like something that you're most excited about right now?
I'm excited about so many things. I'm excited about the opportunity that is gonna, like the agent ecosystem obviously is growing. I think MCP servers are obviously a very good place. So I'm excited about MCP gateways.
Tell me about that, because I haven't heard that word before.
Yeah, MCP gateways are folks who are figuring out how to help you host, manage, and serve your MCPs servers, because obviously they're unique, tooling, so to speak. You don't want to sort of host them like APIs, the way we've hosted APIs. So the same way you have API gateways, MCP gateways are like the end thing. So Symmetry is one of them. I think you and I talked about Symmetry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excuse me. You could. Some of them look like marketplaces, but they also have that gateway element to them where they're helping you manage things like art, and all these type of things.
So you're talking about like a kind of like intranet local API gateway for your particular organization, or like a registry where anyone can
Yeah, I mean, it could be both. So organizations are using it internally. So they're actually open source MCP gateways actually out there as well.
Yeah.
People are beginning to invest in that. So organizations can go take that and use that to manage their entire MCP catalog and stuff like that. And then you have folks who are making it more public. So your MCP server is discoverable in their marketplace and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So that gets me excited, because I feel like how we manage and maintain these things are going to matter. I think a lot of analysts, I was listening to something from Gartner. Not that I'm not that kind of person who's really into
Gartner
the
is like
Gartner
what
thing.
6 months behind and everything.
Yeah, I'm not that kind. But they said something that I just, security is a big deal for AI projects. A lot of AI projects are coming under scrutiny because the security is not always. I think everyone sort of got into the mindset of, let's just do it first. Let's just
And
go
enterprises is hard because like
Yeah.
the stakes are so high.
The stakes are so high. There's a lot of data leakage that could happen and stuff like that. So people are trying to make sure that they can secure how MCP servers are hosted. So it's an interesting space that gets me excited. But what gets me truly excited, just more as a fan of the space, is skills. And I've been wondering, is Anthropic going to monetize this in some way? Because they're spinning up quite a lot of VMs to be able to
Skills.
do this. Yeah.
Okay.
Like it's basically a VM
Yeah.
with instructions, tools. They're calling them scripts that you can just spin up and run.
SOPs.
Yeah, and then they drop the files or whatever they've generated into like some kind of file system. So I'm just wondering, how do we pay for that? Because all VMs, like,
Yeah.
they're spinning up tons and tons.
You
of
know
VMs.
what? I came back from Vercel ship a couple months
Yeah.
ago, and I started trying their Vercel sandbox.
Yeah.
Apparently, if the company like Vercel was like making this extremely generously,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
free all the time, like you can run a sandbox for like an hour for free, and you can
Oh,
run
wow.
multiple ones. So I think the infrastructure cost is not too much for these companies.
Yeah.
I know Cloudflare just came out with their own sandbox as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And that was coupled with like the thing that I mentioned earlier about writing TypeScript API interface
Yeah.
to call that instead of calling the MCP tools right away. I think that the cost for these infrastructure for like ephemeral sandboxes is not too crazy. And I don't know, people still pay for Daytona and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if at a certain scale like Cloudflare and Vercel, like you don't really care about these things anymore.
Yeah. Or they're just trying to reel you in first and foremost.
That's probably why. Yeah, that's probably why.
Yeah, which makes sense. But it to me it caught my attention because it's giving the AI a sandbox to go run its thing and do it. It's such an amazing idea, because it's part of the idea of decoupling the services. I was gonna talk to you about it. I told you I was up until 3 a.m. last night, and that starting to realize that scaling is such a huge thing with LLMs, because we've not dealt with things like this before. These things are very latent. So you have to have special considerations as to how you deal with them. So distributed systems are becoming even more important. So having sandboxes where they can go run securely, do their thing, and then they deliver it to some shared space where you can get that. So to me, I thought someone at Anthropic is definitely thinking. I love those guys. They're thinking. They're like they're
Anthropic is very particular about what they build.
Yeah.
And it's never like the same with other companies.
Yeah.
They have their own way in thinking about workflows. That's
Yeah.
why they launched Claude Code and Skills. I like Skills because I was doing something similar in my code base anyways.
Yeah.
So every code base that I have particular Claude MD files, which are rules files. And in those rules files, I just lay out how I want the code of this particular directory to be.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a folder for like sandbox creation, maybe I have a folder for like API calls to certain API LLM providers, and those are essentially skills. And I put documentation links in there because I don't trust that the agent can go and just Google search and find the right docs for AI SDK 5 that just came out. Like I'm not gonna rely on that. So I love skills. I just still to this day I couldn't wrap my head around like why would they do a code interpreter sandbox to call skills. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't yet. I mean,
Why code?
interpreter. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I have no idea, and I have no thoughts about it. But it seems to work. Like it seems like the skills solution seems to work. reasonably well enough. I've used it like, to do a few things so far, and it's working reasonably well. But I think the architecture is what I'm really excited about. The fact that it's distributing how, where the LLM is running, away from maybe your primary application. Those architectural decisions matter a lot, especially when you're doing things
They're
like
little computers.
Yeah.
Because there's heavy emphasis on file system.
Yeah.
There's heavy emphasis on how, because LLMs are trained on code a lot.
Yeah.
That's why it relies on file system. That's how when Anthropic in the documentation says like memory in Cloud Code, it's actually a file.
Yeah.
It's always a file system, grep, ls, all that stuff. And then now you talk about like sandbox, little file systems inside of an environment, little computers.
Exactly.
It's gonna be little computers running everything.
Little computers running everything. That way you sort of allow your own application to run without that sort of load. Because right now I think what's happening is like people are overwhelming their own services with so many of those LLM calls, and you have to wait for them for a long time. I mean, you can build things to be asynchronous and things of that nature, but you're overwhelming your primary service. But now I think distribution. I was thinking about this a while back to say, using like functions as a service, like using lambdas and things like that to distribute what the LLMs call. My very first sort of enterprise grade deployment was actually a serverless pipeline, where the whole ingestion started with you threw something in an S3 bucket, and then a function is triggered and it sends to another function. And so it was all event based and stuff like that. So I think that idea, them building it as part of their tooling, is remarkable, because maybe it might not be very apparent for an engineer who wants to build something, but they're almost sort of making it standardized for you to see like this is an approach you could take. So I think that gets me excited. So architecture is a big thing in all of this, and Anthropic is leading the way, I think, in that regard.
And you kind of had to be technical to kind of like watch the space that Anthropic is in, right? Which is such a shame, right? Because like most of people's attention and the media's attention is on OpenAI, and the kind of like consumer product that they're pushing out, stuff like that.
It feels like OpenAI is very much interested in user experience, and Anthropic is very much interested in sort of architecture and thinking through like deep problem solving.
Yeah.
Which is fun, which is great for us, right?
As builders, developers, I think they're betting huge on the fact that LLMs are really trained on code, and as long as it's leveraging systems and standards and formats that are related to file systems and code, it's gonna do really well. Yeah, and I think it's a good bet.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing. I mean, we're living in the best time, so hope people are keep building, and we'll keep on building and keep on seeing where this thing takes us.
There's so much more I want to talk about, but I know you're a family man. You gotta go pick up kids. School run. I don't have that responsibility yet, but I understand. But thank you so much for hopping out today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I always feel invigorated and excited after having a chat with you. So can't wait to do more of these for sure.
Same, man. All right.
Thank you.